like the Sheikh and rugby and Nelson Mandela.
It's the motherland, you know. Our ancestors are from there. And I also think about the good and bad of Africa. The good being all of the exotic animals over there. It's rich in history from the Egyptians and Moses, and then of course with slavery and all the great African warriors and leaders like Nelson Mandela.
It's a continent. It's like around the equator.
I heard that it's a third world country, and that's a terrible thing, and a lot of people are in slavery and they are taken advantage of, and I just wish it could be more civil.
I know there's a lot of sand in the northern parts, a lot of forest, rainforest in the center, like the Congo, and then I think southern Africa is still kind of hot and dry, maybe.
Okay.
I know there's sharks, like great white sharks off the tip of South Africa. That's a thing.
So like the top half of Africa, it's all the Sahara Desert. So it's real like dry, it's hot, it's humid.
I'm unaware of exactly what it is, but I think it's a desert.
I know it's hot, like some safari and all the stuff. That's all I pretty much know. I guess.
Hot. There's a giant desert surrounding, well, not surrounding, but in about 2/3 of the continent.
Curtis Keim states that we are biologically wired to make sense of reality even when it makes no particular sense. Humans strive to understand and categorize what is in front of them. This is why we have a tendency to stereotype those people and places that we are unfamiliar with. Some ways through which stereotyping is still perpetuated today include racism, exploitation, entertainment, and self-definition. Racism is very different today than it used to be. What stereotypes are still perpetuated with racist means tend to come from a more private or home environment. Exploitation used to happen because we were able to view Africa as inferior, and that justified the actions of the past. Today, we continue to have a need to remain superior over Africa, and we exploit them through means of racial inferiority. We will come back to this point when discussing self-definition. We continue to stereotype Africa in the entertainment industry for one main reason. If Africa was seen as equal to America, then what would be interesting about it? The term exotic is often used when describing Africa, and that leads to exoticism, where we portray only a portion of a culture and allow the imagination to use stereotypes to fill in the missing pieces. These missing pieces are supplied to solidify the fact that people are more different from us than similar, especially when it comes to discussing Africa. Self-definition is the last way we are discussing stereotyping. We use self-definition to understand progress and daily living. We define progress as moving forward, and anything that is not moving forward is considered bad. So when we look at Africa and see that many cultures there still live in tribes, we see that as a bad thing because to us, it looks like Africa hasn't made any progress towards moving away from a tribal society. We compare ourselves to others by seeing what they do or do not have compared to us.
There is much proof that the earliest civilizations started in Africa. To know the history of Africa is to know, somewhat, where the organization of current societies form today. There is this idea that a lot of how Africa is organized was simply just as tribes. There's this idea that there are really only 5 political organizations in Africa: states, bands, confederacies, chiefdoms, and of course, tribes. In his book, Mistaking Africa, Curtis Keim points out that the general view of tribes is that people that are a part of them are smaller, less evolved, and that they are primordial, static, backwards, and irrational. However, tribes are far from how they ran things in Africa. The earliest known civilization can be traced back to ancient Egypt. During the period in which ancient Egypt flourished, the civilization was successful by creating a social hierarchical system in which the pharaohs were respected and seen as authority. In order to keep this division, a taxation system was created in accordance with the agricultural seasons. As ancient Egypt continued to grow, the civilization created an army as protection for the kingdom. Writings, or hieroglyphics, were written on clay palettes, walls of tombs, or papyrus. The purpose of the creation of hieroglyphics was to record the changes in the Nile River, which would dictate taxes and deeds, and the terms of the kings or pharaohs. Ancient Egypt also had a distinct social system. The valued rulers of the kingdom were the pharaohs, as it was believed that they were descendants from gods. The Nile River was used to predict how fertile soil would be for crops, which would leverage the taxes that were owed to the government. The taxes were used for government advancement and public needs. This created the division between the ruler of the kingdom, those who worked for the rulers, and the general public. Since ancient Egypt became so powerful and well-known, invasions from the outside started happening. As a result, the Egyptians ended up creating a standing army, thus revitalizing and strengthening Egypt.
There are many superstitions that surround Africa and its rights to legitimate success over the centuries that have influenced the lives of others today. One of these superstitions would consist of religion. Religion molds a society because it places itself in the minds and hearts of people to produce certain healthy actions to promote further life in a cohesive community. These religious influences begin with appointing leaders, guiding one's way of life, and creating a culture. Looking into the theories of state formation, one notices that the divine right theory comes into play. This right was used to ensure absolute authority by the royalty over the state or empire. As their kingdoms grew, and along with that their power, they implemented a wider range of authority and pronounced themselves as descendants of the gods. The position of being a divine king and having it acknowledged allowed them to have supreme control and respect, along with other aspects that permitted them to rule. In 1324, the king of the Mali Empire, Kankan Musa, went on a pilgrimage to Mecca. When he returned, he converted Timbuktu into a center of learning and religion. A mosque was built, and within this building was the focus of African scholarship, consisting of Islamic law and politics, as well as theology. This contributed to the way of life that Muslims of the Islam faith took guidance from. Lastly, religion is the source of culture in a society. It is the acting out of a vision of personal identity and human community. African art that adheres to religious categories speaks to those who are also a part of that religion, enabling a dialogue between themselves and others who identify with it also.
Another reason for studying Africa is that it impacts many core disciplines on an educational level. Disciplines such as humanities and social sciences are impacted by the study of Africa. Since education is a very important factor to many people around the world, it will make sense to know where these disciplines reside from and why it is important to study Africa. To study Africa, people must see it equal to the study of other continents and countries. Some scholars in African diaspora has the challenge of other scholars not recognizing the study of Africa as significantly equal to the study of other countries. The study of Africa has tremendously affected anthropology, and anthropology has affected other disciplines such as social sciences. Many social sciences that branch from anthropology was built from foundations from Africa. It is important to know this because students to this day are taking these classes, and the study of Africa still affects us today.